Hi, this is Happiness Guy. Welcome to today's episode of Vestibular Talks. Today's special guest is the Vertigo Doctor. Yes, the Vertigo Doctor. Dr. Madison helps people that are suffering from dizziness or vertigo resume their lives and return to exercise and daily life activities. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy the episode, guys. Find your happiness. Hi, Dr. Madison. Welcome to this episode of Vestibular Talks. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you. And thank you for having me.
No, thank you for taking the time to chat with us. I'm quite excited, especially because your Instagram handle is the Vertigo Doctor. So that right away got my attention. I'm like, the Vertigo Doctor, we gotta talk.
Here I am. Happy to be
Awesome.
here.
Dr. Madison, in your Instagram, I love the little kind of like sentence that you have at the beginning, which says, you help people that are dealing with dizziness return to their normal life and their normal activities. So
Mhm.
let's take it back from the beginning. First of all, tell us a little bit about who you are and what is it that you do.
Yeah. Okay. So I am a physical therapist. I specialize in vestibular disorders. I graduated from the University of Wisconsin in Madison and have been treating vestibular disorders since I graduated. I really came to love treating them and listening to people and their story and just learning more and more about vestibular problems and issues and all the things that can kind of change and go wrong and be right and all of that from an internship. I kind of accidentally fell into it and I've wanted to do it since then.
That is
Um,
pretty interesting. Dr. Madison that graduated in Madison.
yeah,
All right,
I'm,
that's awesome that you decided to go into the vestibular type of like pathway because not many people know about vestibular conditions. Before it happened to me, I had never in my life heard about the vestibular system. I didn't even know we had one. So,
of course.
so tell us a little bit about what is the difference between vertigo and dizziness.
Yeah, so there's definitely a difference between vertigo and dizziness. Vertigo is the incorrect perception that you or the room around you is spinning, and dizziness is everything else. Caveat is that dizziness is the umbrella term, so vertigo can go under dizziness, but they're not the same feeling because dizziness is so many things. So in my practice, I hear about dizziness being anything from mud is sliding back and forth in my head to I have a hot air balloon in my head or I just feel off. And those symptoms are different from the symptom of the room is spinning around me.
Yes.
Usually, when we think room spinning around us, we think positional vertigo. And when we say other kinds of dizziness, we think everything else. Not saying that other kinds of dizziness don't happen in BPPV and that vertigo doesn't happen in other kinds of vestibular diagnoses. They cross over a lot, but I do hear the incorrect use of the word vertigo pretty frequently. Like the use of the word vertigo for, let's say, standing up too fast. I have vertigo. No, you probably just have a little bit of a head rush. Not for everyone, but for
Yes.
the general population, right? We're not
And
talking about like dysautonomia and things like that.
yeah, Dr. Madison is I like the fact that like you seem very kind of like intelligent and well, like you have a lot of knowledge about these conditions. I see your Instagram page and you break it down a lot for people to understand. And the fact that you're younger, like you're from a younger generation makes
Mhm.
you kind of like more open-minded to understand that vertigo is not a diagnosis because like you said,
Yes.
if the word vertigo gets thrown a lot, especially by older doctors, like when you go to the hospital or whatever and you say, oh, I'm dizzy, they're like, oh yeah, you have vertigo. And you're like, okay,
Yeah.
well, so our condition is causing it. No, your condition is vertigo type of thing is what they say, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I do get some DMs and things, and I never give medical advice over the internet, obviously, unless you are my patient, then we do that separately. But for people who have this diagnosis of vertigo, there is a problem that's not actually vertigo. Sorry, someone's calling me. Go away. Okay. There is an underlying problem that's not vertigo, right? Or that's not, the diagnosis is never vertigo. The diagnosis is vestibular migraine, so you have a symptom of vertigo, or you have BPPV, so you have vertigo, right? You have, and a lot of times it's not vertigo that you have, you just have dizziness, and there could be a lot of causes for dizziness, right? You could have drank too much alcohol, that could make you dizzy. You could have lingering factors from vestibular neuritis that can make you dizzy. There are all such a spectrum of these things, and I think that considering that it could be a vestibular disorder first saves something along the lines of, and don't quote me on this exact statistic, but I think it saves somewhere along the lines of like 3 months on a person's diagnosis.
Yeah, which as you know, these vestibular conditions can be very overwhelming for people that start experiencing them. So an early diagnosis helps because it allows people to understand, okay, this is what I have, let's figure out how we're going to treat it. But sometimes people go years without getting the proper diagnosis and they don't know the proper treatment for it. So Dr. Madison, now let's talk about different vestibular conditions. Let's start with one of the most common ones, which is BPPV. Let's talk a little about it. What can be some causes? How can be some treatment? Like, what can you tell us about it?
Yeah. So when I have a patient come into my clinic, let's say without a diagnosis or the diagnosis of vertigo, okay, the first thing and the most important thing is the subjective history and the interview of the patient, because more than anything else, yeah, I can do some objective tests, look at your eyes, see how you track, see what happens when you shake your head all around. But more important than anything is how you experience the symptoms. So I had a patient today who said, the room never spins, but it only ever happened, the dizziness feeling that I have only ever happens when I'm laying on my back or I'm doing backstroke in the pool. So I was like, you know, we're just going to test you for BPPV anyway. Doesn't hurt to try. The Dix-Hall Pike's pretty easy for most people. He was a pretty agile dude. I was like, okay, we're going to just test for this. He had BPPV. He's like, the room doesn't look like it's spinning though. Like things are moving, but nothing is spinning. So there's also that issue, right? If everyone describes their perception of vertigo a little bit differently, right? So we start there. Like, what are the most obvious diagnoses of vertigo or dizziness or vestibular disorders? And I have this running list in my head, right? They go from most common to least common. So the things that I most commonly see, and I think probably most people who treat vestibular disorders do see, are things like BPPV, vestibular neuritis, vestibular migraine. You see some Menieres disease, some MDDS, things like that. But it kind of goes down the line, and being able to pick from each of those and knowing the diagnostic criteria in your head. And if you don't have them all memorized, like the ones for 3PD, for instance, are really, really long. A quick Google search. No one really, it's okay to do that. Especially if you're like, hey, I think you might have this thing. Let's check all of the diagnoses. The second part is that as a physical therapist, I can't actually legally, I don't know if it's differently in Canada, but legally make a diagnosis. I could have a PT diagnosis and say, you have signs and symptoms consistent with this insert thing here. And then I can talk to your doctor about giving you that official diagnosis and what they think, what he or she thinks. So I think that that's important to kind of have a running list of diagnoses in your head and say, let's say someone has dizziness for 24 hours. It's kind of vertiginous. You might have some nausea. You felt really sick for about a day, day and a half. Okay, your mind first should go to neuritis versus, oh, this has been recurring for years. Your mind goes more towards migraine, Menieres, endolymphatic hydrops. And it's not perfect for everyone, but knowing the timing of how someone experiences it and the actual symptoms of how someone experiences their vestibular disorder, I think is the most important part.
Yeah, Dr. Madison, the advantage about, well, I shouldn't say advantage, but the good thing, quote unquote, about BPPV is that it could be easily treated by a PT like you, doing some head techniques that obviously I would recommend people come to see you, because people often try to find them in Google and like, oh, I'm going to do it myself. And
yeah,
they might not get it right. So it's usually better to come to a professional and get it done.
I do agree with that completely. There are some cases where I feel comfortable giving a patient the skill and knowledge and ability to do an epi themselves. I would say someone who can bring the pillow that they're going to use to put their head over, a partner that they can trust and will be near, like a person who lives at home, a neighbor, a child, someone who could come over quickly to do it, and someone who lives remotely and won't be able to get to the clinic, and but has internet access and can call me while we do it. So those are sort of my criteria for people that I would say, yeah, I'm comfortable teaching you how to do the epi maneuver when you are completely asymptomatic, if you're a person who this recurs for often.
Yes.
Other than that, I would say most people should come to the clinic, and I even have slots that are like same day slots for people with BPPV. They're at the beginning of my day, so you can come the next morning early, or the end of my day, my last patient. And I try to fit people in there because I think it is important, because a lot of times people who have BPPV, it's in the posterior canal, right? We have 3 canals. It's almost never, it's like 1 to 2% of the time in the anterior, almost never there. Some people, it's in the horizontal canal, and most people, it's in the posterior canal. So if we know it's most likely there, and we do an epi maneuver, do 2, maybe 3, have them come back in 48 hours to check, that could be pretty sure it'll be gone. But I find when people try to do it themselves at home, more often than not, they end up putting it into the horizontal canal.
Aggravated.
Yeah, so it's not impossible, of course, to get it out of the horizontal canal. Still very treatable, but I do find it makes people a little bit more nauseous. And then we have to treat both canals, which just takes longer and is much more frustrating to the patient. So I almost never recommend you do it yourself.
Yes. Now, Dr. Madison, I've gotten people in the past, they asked me, they're like, okay, I had an episode of BPPV. I went and got it treated. The PT did the maneuver. He went away. And then they are always wondering, would it come back? What are the chances that it may come back?
So your chances that it come back, I think, are about 50-50. So about 80% of the time, we have no idea why you get BPPV, right? We can't really, there's some correlations like high blood pressure, low vitamin D, osteoporosis, going through chemotherapy. Those are kind of some big ones that it can happen. Doesn't mean you will get it, right? But you can. So that's like step 1 is, did it happen for one of these reasons? How can we prevent it from happening in the future? Other people have an underlying vestibular condition. So people with vestibular migraine, we know that you are more likely than the average person to get BPPV. We know the same thing about almost all other vestibular weaknesses, whether it's peripheral or central. So if we have that on one hand, yeah, you're more likely for it to come back. We can also, I have some recurring patients who I'm like, you need some extra testing. So the rule that I learned where I interned in Texas for this was that if someone has any other form of dizziness, like they sometimes feel off or lightheaded frequently, they have ringing in their ear, a history of headaches, pressure in their ear, some other vestibular symptoms like that, then we're like, hey, we should screen you for some other vestibular problems like secondary endolymphatic eye drops, vestibular migraines. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it might be a huge effect for your life. It's just good to know that you might have this underlying condition, right? There are other people who they've come back 3, maybe 4 times, and it's like, okay, well, it's time for you to get checked out for something, because it's unlikely that will keep happening. For some people, we call them unicorns. For some people, it does just keep happening, and it's frustrating and annoying. It's for some people. But there are most people who have this happening over and over and over again. I find it's because they have an underlying vestibular problem.
Yes. And that's the how would I put it, the irony that sometimes these vestibular conditions can kind of like coexist with each other. So
Absolutely.
Not only people might be dealing with one, but there could be another one that is in the background also amplifying the symptoms of the other one. So yeah, it's interesting. Dr. Madison, now let's talk about another condition that seems to be getting quite popular, Menieres disease. So often when you read about Menieres disease, it often affects people that are elderly, that they're losing their hearing, they're getting up there in age. But I've seen it more and more now with younger people. Maybe because of the access to social media that we can see it happening a lot, or people get diagnosed with it. Do you often encounter people with Meniere's disease?
I think Meniere's disease is actually more rare than we think it is. It, from what I've learned and kind of seen in some research and talked to some other providers, it was a diagnosis that we really like to throw around. Like, oh, you go to the ER, you had an episode of dizziness, you have BPPV, or you have Meniere's disease. So there's sort of that school of thought. There's
Mm-hmm.
another school of thought that we know better and better the diagnostic criteria for Meniere's disease, and it can coexist oftentimes with vestibular migraine, which is sort of going through its own, it's not by any means like a trend, but the more we learn about something, the more we can kind of diagnose people with different conditions, right? So as we learn more about Meniere's disease, it becomes more diagnosed, but I'm not saying that anyone who's been diagnosed with that doesn't happen, but I'm not sure that everyone meets the exact criteria. Then again, some people or most people with conditions of any sort don't meet all of the criteria. So it's sort of like a thing you have to weigh in
Yeah.
that option. I'm not sure if I answered your question well.
Yeah, no, you're right. And you mentioned a couple of times the words vestibular migraine, which gets us to that question. Now, I am diagnosed with vestibular migraines.
Mm-hmm.
It hit me chronically at the age of 33 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that seems to be a pattern for a lot of people in their late 20s, mid 30s. They get the big episode that takes it to a chronic stage,
Mm-hmm.
or when they have something like a pregnancy after they have their baby,
Mm-hmm.
somehow this triggers this vestibular migraines in them. I often get people that tell me, "Do you think that seeing a vestibular physiotherapist will help me?" And I said, "Absolutely." I said, the maneuvers are not really going to do much per se, but the
Mm-hmm.
vestibular rehabilitation therapy that they teach you to do will
Mm-hmm.
help you gain that confidence in your balance again, because you
Mm-hmm.
need to challenge that balance, and you need to, like, when you're feeling dizzy, you
Yes.
don't want to move. You want to stay as still as
Yep.
possible, and you wanna lay down as much as you can and not move from that bed. And I get it. I've been there. But I noticed that the more you start doing movements and start kind of like engaging that vestibular system again, you start to build your confidence and your strength to do
Mm-hmm.
more normal things. So how do you feel about that? How do you feel about VRT?
I love BRT. That's what I do all day, every day. It's my favorite thing. I love BRT. I'm like, that's all I talk about. VRT, vestibular rehabilitation therapy, is one of the most important parts for a person with any form of vestibular disorder. It starts with BPPV, right? Like that's the mechanical issue that we treat with an Epley maneuver or a different canalith repositioning maneuver, we call them. And so that's like step one. Do you have BPV? Yes or no? Treat that. After that, if you feel imbalanced, if head movements make you dizzy, if you can't turn around back and forth in your kitchen to cook something and you're like, oh, I always feel so dizzy, I have to sit down for 10 minutes, things like that, those are the things that we do in vestibular therapy. So you have two nerves. They're your vestibulocochlear nerve on either side of your head. It goes from your brain to your this peripheral vestibular system, that curly Q thing we always show pictures of. And that connection, it's just not working properly. So what vestibular therapy does is strengthen that connection so that when you move your head, your eyes stay still. When you don't want your eyes to stay still and you want your whole head to move and your eyes, that will happen. It won't make you feel dizzy. I compare it frequently to strength training because that's something we can kind of all understand. It's very concrete versus vestibular therapy, which is sort of abstract, right? We don't really know there's a vestibular system, like you said, until something goes wrong.
Yeah.
So it's something we basically take for granted. Like I always say when I show people my picture of my vestibular system in my office, like half of it's the cochlea, half of it's your vestibular system. Like we all learn about the cochlea in high school biology class, but we always forget to teach people about their balance organ section. So basically that is not giving or receiving or understanding the correct signal. And that is the thing that keeps your eyes steady. It knows where you are moving. It detects linear acceleration. It detects where gravity is. It can detect if you're falling. It can't detect if like you're moving or like gravity's moving you, because it doesn't know the difference. But it tells you where you are in space at all times. And when there's something wrong with that system or the receptor from that system, it's so important to retrain that. So back to my strength training analogy that's more concrete. If you have knee pain, a lot of the times, not all the time, but a lot of time it's from weakness of your quad. So the top thigh muscle, right? So you strengthen that muscle, your knee feels better, there's not so much pain, you have better control, you can go for longer walks, you might be able to run again, you can do heavier squats, deeper squats, like whatever you want to do with that quad now, right? And so if you take pain here instead of dizziness, then swap them. It's exactly the same, but in your vestibular system. So it's just strength training for your vestibular system.
I love that analogy about the knee pain because my brother actually, he has that. He used to have knee pain for years. And he's like, I think something's wrong with my knee. I think it might be like displaced, like something is wrong. And he went to see a physiotherapist, a sports physiotherapist. And they said, what you just said exactly. They know you have to work on your muscles, on your quads, on your legs. And he's like, no, but the pain is in my knee. And they're like, I know. And they showed him exercises. And when he strengthened those muscles, the pain reduced almost by 90%. Like he still gets some of it, but it got way, way, way better. And,
awesome.
So yeah, your analogy was quite on point. Dr. Madison, now, as I'm sure you know, being dizzy sucks. Like there's no other way around. Like it just sucks. No, and people that experience it daily can tell you that it's not fun, because even people that experience it for a few minutes or for a few days, like episodic, they still don't like it at all. Now, what some people tell me is, if I go see a physiotherapist, if I take the medications, whatever medication that might be, would it go away completely? And I tell them, I don't know. Like that's something that nobody can guarantee. But what I can tell you is that if you take your medication that your doctor prescribed and you do the physiotherapy exercises, the VRT that the physiotherapist is prescribing for you, there is a really high chance that you might be able to resume normal activities, even with some dizziness in the background, like with me. Like I'm able to drive, I'm able to work, I'm able to do things that I couldn't.
Amazing.
Yeah, once the chronic episode hit me, I couldn't do those things for like 6 months. Now I can manage them. Would I love for them to go away completely? Of course I would. Like, I mean, who wouldn't? But you get to a stage where you can manage it. How many of your patients that you see have that expectation of like, oh, I just wanted to disappear, I just wanted to go for completely?
Yeah. I think everyone has an expectation that like this can go away, this can be fixed. Like I want 100%, I expect 100%. And I'm not saying that some people don't get to 100%. Yeah. A lot of people do. A lot of people go into dizziness remission, their balance feels great, yada, yada. That's fantastic. It doesn't happen for everyone, but most people who understand their triggers can either remove their triggers, change their lifestyle somehow, and do their VRT, have a really good plan with their doctor, who hopefully listens to them. Those people are very, very successful. So remember, you're always allowed to fire your doctor. That's a big step, right? If you feel like your provider isn't listening to you, your PT, your neurologist, your whoever isn't listening to you, you're always allowed to go find healthcare elsewhere. Healthcare is always your choice. And especially now where we're doing more and more telehealth, like it's easier if you're in a pretty remote town to look and see like, oh, maybe there's someone in the bigger town in my state that I can see. So I think that's important to remember. There is no cure for any form of like vestibular migraine. There's no cure for Menieres disease. There's kind of a cure for BPPV, but like it might come back. So not really. There's not really a cure for these things, right? But they can all be managed when managed properly, right? And so I think that understanding how you manage your disorder is a really big step. And I would say the biggest things are a really good healthcare team with medical doctors, physical therapists, probably a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist, psychologist, something like that would really be good to have on your team.
Yes. And I tell people that I get people that are this, and I lived it too, that these conditions make you very anxious and almost like panic for everything. So when you talk to a professional that can help you like walk through that, then things do improve for sure. Madison, you mentioned telehealth. Are people able to reach you through telehealth, even if they live in other states, or because you're based in New York, correct? Yes. Are people able to reach you if they live in other states, or do they have to be in your state?
So the way telehealth works in the US is that I have to be licensed in your state in order for me to practice telehealth.
Mm,
So I can be out of the state, but you have to be in the state. And I have to abide by those states' rules. So right now I am licensed in New Jersey and New York. I am working on Washington, D.C.,
mhm.
California, so some big ones, and then probably Wyoming
Oh,
are
wow.
the ones, which is like in the middle there. But um, I'm hoping to reach as many people as possible, of course. Licensing is uh, a battle in itself just because it's a very long process for a lot of things. But I am working on getting licensed in quite a few states in order to reach more people. And then I have a couple colleagues who I can refer to in the states that I'm not licensed in who are excellent.
All right. And can patients come to you out of their own accord, or do they have to be referred by a medical doctor, or how does it work?
So in the United States, everyone has direct access to physical therapy in all states with some caveats. For instance, in New York, you have to have 3 years of practice in order to see a direct access patient. In
Oh,
California, you can see a physical therapist at any time, direct access. However, after 12 visits or 45 days, I believe the rule is, you have to have a signature on your plan of care from a primary care or neurologist, like some form of medical doctor. So there are some caveats to each state for the most part. Some of them, like Wisconsin, has excellent direct access where you can pretty much see someone for a decently long time as long as you're showing progress. I'm pretty sure it's Wisconsin. Anyway, so everyone has different laws, but reach out to a physical therapist and say, hey, can I see you? What do I need to do? Most vestibular providers are really, really good about getting prescriptions for vestibular rehab for their patients. And if you have a foundation with a doctor already, it's actually something you can call your doctor and ask, hey, will you give me a prescription for VRT? And they can just fax it over or email it to you.
okay, cool. Thank you. Dr.
Mhm.
Madison, another question that I get often, and again, I live it myself, is with my eyes. So when my balance went out of whack, my eyes went out of whack. Everything started vibrating. It was hard
Mhm.
to focus. Anything that has movement, like seeing a train pass by,
Yep.
that will make me want to throw up all over the place. So, so for example, when people are having all these visual disturbances, as per se, are they able to also get some vestibular rehab exercises with you as well, like for their vision?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the not being able to find something that's still, usually without really focusing, it's something we call, well, there are a lot of different things, but let's go with gaze instability. So you can do this with me, and I'm sure you've done this a million times. You can stick your thumb out like this, and you can focus on your thumb, right?
Okay.
You can shake your head slowly or quickly back and forth, and you should be able to keep your thumb in place. Things behind it might move, but your thumb
Yeah.
should stay in place, right?
Yeah.
So that is the job of your vestibular system, to keep your eyes still while you are moving. So it's really good for high intensity sports. It's great for walking down the street. It's great for going on a run and the whole world doesn't bounce, right? So things
Yes.
that vibrate and things that bounce up and down, that's because your vestibular system isn't working the right way. It's not timed correctly. Okay.
Yeah.
That happens with most vestibular disorders. So if you practice these exercises, ones where you go like this and move back and forth, you don't always use your thumb. A lot of times it's like pasted to a wall, right?
Yeah.
Um, that will retrain your vestibular system. As far as the train going by, making you want to throw up, that feeling, that is something called visual vertigo. And that's when you become very visually dependent
Mhm.
as your main form of balance and equilibrium. So you have three systems of balance. You have the way you feel the floor, you have your eyes, and you have your inner ears. People who have vestibular dysfunction tend to be over reliant on their eyes. This is a normal reaction, but it's something that you can trust. You can hold it accountable. You can say, okay, I know that thing over there is still. I know that I am still. Okay, nothing's moving. It's all good. But if I'm sitting in front of a person and they start moving and my eyes are saying, oh my God, am I moving? It's sort of like that feeling when you're sitting in a car and the car next to you reverses and you don't know if
Moves.
you're moving or not,
Yes.
right? Okay, that
Yes.
happens to almost everyone. But if it happens when like all the time and you feel like you're moving chronically, that's abnormal, right? The split second where, oh my gosh, am I moving or not? And then it's over, that is normal. It's happened to me 100 times in my life, right? But if it's all the time and if you are feeling really nauseous because just a train is passing you, that's what vestibular therapy is for. So slowly being like, hey, I'm going to play this video in front of you in a really large screen, super close to your face, and make you watch it for 5, 10, 15 seconds, and then you stop. And you say, look, I'm still. But your brain thinks that because your eyes are moving, or eyes see movement, that you are then moving. And your vestibular system is supposed to act like a switchboard and say, am I moving, or is the sky around me moving, or is the train moving, or am I sure I'm not moving? I'm really not sure. It's supposed to say, okay, things are passing me, but my feet are still. All right, we're still. It's supposed to say, I'm walking on gravel, but I can see over there that there's going to be a divot. I'm going to listen to my eyes. And it's supposed to help you switch back and forth. But when you have a vestibular dysfunction, it's much more difficult for it to switch one way and the other. And that's what makes you feel dizzy.
It is, and I love how you explain it, because you look like, have you seen those books that are like Business for Dummies or Selling for Dummies? I feel like vestibular system for dummies, because you're putting it in a way that is so easy to understand. And
good, I'm happy.
Yes, and so relatable, because, for example, when I just did this exercise with you, that my thumb was fine, but everything around it was moving, and I was like, "Oh crap! I hope this is normal." And you just say, "You're like, oh no, if the battery is moving, that's also okay." So like when you explain things like that, it makes people feel more at ease, like they don't panic as easily. And I love also something that you mentioned earlier, the fact that our vestibular system, it's our eyes, our ears, our joints, and also it gives us the sensation of space and gravity where we're standing. The other day, so my wife bought one of these new egg chairs, like they hang from something, so they are not attached to the ground. They're just like kind of like on the air, basically, by this spring. So she's like, "Oh, try it, sit on it." I'm like, "Okay." I sat on it. That was trippy, Dr. Madison. That was very trippy, because it's like my body didn't know what was happening. It's like, how are we floating, but we're not solid, but we're solid, like so. I sat on it for like 5 minutes. And I'm like, nope. So I got up again.
Not for me.
But it's habituation. You know, you have to keep practicing those kind of things to tell your brain it's okay. Like it's not going, nothing bad's going to happen. So I love how
that's your new exercise.
Yeah. So I love how you explain things, that you make it very easy to understand and easy to relate to. Dr. Madison, what does the future hold for Dr. Madison?
For me, so currently, my last day of my real job is tomorrow, which is crazy. I love where I work. I work in Manhattan right now at a really nice clinic on the Upper East Side. And if you ever need a referral, DM me or something, because it's an absolutely wonderful clinic on the Upper East Side. I am moving to a couple of different places with my significant other. He and I are kind of going on a United States adventure for the next few months. And so I am seeing patients in New York State and New Jersey State, and hopefully the places that I get licensed in DC and California. I am starting my own telehealth practice. I'm really excited about that. I'm going to start seeing patients remotely, because in COVID, I discovered that people with vestibular disorders do tremendously well over telehealth for many, many reasons. And so I've been finding huge success with that, and will hopefully continue to moving forward.
Very nice. And it sounds cool that that you and your partner kind of like want to go and explore and have this adventure. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, we're excited.
For Canada, let me know.
I will. I'll let you know if I'm ever up there.
All right.
I'm sure we will be.
Yes. Dr. Madison, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you?
Yes, so I'm at the Vertigo Doctor on everything except for Twitter, where I'm at the Vertigo Doc, because they cut me off. I said, your handle's too long, whatever. TheVertigoDoctor.com, at the Vertigo Doctor on Instagram, and Facebook.com/the Vertigo Doctor.
Awesome, thank you. Dr. Madison, my last question to you is, this channel is called Find Your Chappiness, which means find your happiness. So how does Dr. Madison find her chappiness?
By helping people with this vestibular disorders in as many ways that I can, in as many places that I can. Find balance and find their ability to do exercise and other amazing things with their lives.
Awesome. Yeah, find balance. That's a good one.
Finding balance.
Yeah, yeah. Dr. Martin, I don't know the Vestibular Disorders Association. I don't know if you ever spoken to them, but if you like, I can connect you with them as well. And because maybe the fact that you're gonna be traveling and moving around, if they have any patients or anybody around those areas that you're gonna be at, maybe they could refer them or tell them to get in touch.
Absolutely. That's actually another place you can find me, as I am a registered person on the Vita website. So thank you for that. Yes, I will reach out to them again and tell them that I am bopping around the US.
Awesome. All right, Dr. Martin. Well, it's been a pleasure. I'm excited that you're the Vertigo doctor and that we learned so much about you today. And then hopefully this whole journey for patients and for the practitioners like you, it's gonna take us to a life more rebalanced, because I see that more and more technologies and more different tools are coming in to help people with these conditions. So yeah, like I'm excited to see what the future holds.
Me as well. I'm super excited, and thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Awesome. Bye. Have a good afternoon.
Bye. Have a good afternoon.